The rain had been falling on Memphis since 4 in the morning, and it was still falling at 6:47 when Celeste Fontaine ran the red light on Poplar Avenue and hit the old black Silverado so cleanly on the passenger side that both vehicles spun a full quarter turn before stopping. She knew she had run the light. She had been on her phone, reading a text from her attorney about the trust dispute that had been consuming every waking hour since her father died 6 weeks ago. And she had looked up at precisely the wrong moment and seen the truck, and done nothing useful in the time available. The airbag deployed. Her phone hit the dashboard and cracked down the middle. She sat in the wreckage of her leased Porsche Cayenne, and the first coherent thought she had was not about herself. It was about the truck. The Silverado was a 2004 with a custom flat black respray that had been done by hand. She could see the brush texture in the rain, and a rear bed fitted with welded steel toolbox mounts that had been fabricated, not purchased. The passenger door was caved in from the impact. The truck had absorbed the hit the way things absorb hits when they are built with enough structural integrity to redistribute force instead of collapsing under it. It was still running. The man who got out was not running. He moved at the same pace Kenji Mori moved, the same pace Marcus Delaney moved, the pace of someone whose internal register does not have a panic setting. He walked around the front of his truck and looked at the passenger door, and then he looked at her car, and then he came to her window and crouched down so his eyes were level with hers. He was tall, dark-skinned, somewhere in his early 40s, with the kind of face that had been through weather both literal and otherwise, and had arrived on the other side of it settled. He had a scar along his left jaw that was old enough to be part of the geography of his face rather than an event on it. His hands on her window were calloused at the base of every finger, and his left hand had a grease mark on the back of it that he had not managed to fully remove, and he wore no rings. And none of this was what she noticed first. What she noticed first was that he was not angry. "Are you hurt?" he said. She did a quick inventory. "No," she said. "I don't think so." He looked at her eyes. He checked both of them. Not obviously, the way someone checks things when they know what they're looking for. "Can you open the door?" She could. He held it while she got out and stood on the wet asphalt in the rain and looked at what she had done to his truck. The passenger door was a loss. The wheel arch had crumpled into the tire. The side mirror was on the ground in 3 pieces. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I ran the light. It was completely my fault. I'll cover everything." He was looking at the tire, which had been pushed slightly inward by the impact of the arch. He crouched down and looked at the wheel bearing from below. He put his hand on the rotor and held it for a moment. "The bearing's okay," he said. "I can drive it." "The door is destroyed," she said. "The door was already halfway there," he said. He stood. "Do you need a hospital?" "No," she said. "I need you to tell me your name so I can pay for this." He looked at her for a moment with an attention that was not invasive and not warm and not cold. It was the attention of someone filing a fact. "Solomon Cross," he said. The name meant nothing to her. She gave him her name and her insurance information and her card. He looked at the card for a moment and put it in his jacket pocket without reaction, which was the first unusual thing because people reacted to the Fontaine name in Memphis. They had been reacting to it for 3 generations. "I have to get my daughter to school," he said. "The car okay to leave here until the tow comes?" She looked at his truck, at the caved passenger door, at the fact that his daughter had been planning to sit in that seat this morning. "Where is she?" Celeste said. He looked at her. There was a pause that lasted approximately 1 second. "She's home," he said. "She missed the bus. I was coming back for her." Celeste looked at the passenger door again. He was already on his phone calling the tow. His voice on the phone was the same as his voice in person. Level, specific, without wasted syllables. He gave the cross streets, the damage description, the timing. He hung up and called someone else. One sentence. His daughter's name, which was Jade, telling someone named Miss Loretta that he'd be 15 minutes late. He hung up and looked at Celeste standing in the rain. "Come on," he said. "I'll drive you wherever you're going." "Your truck," she said. "Drives fine on 3 doors," he said. Solomon Cross had grown up in South Memphis in a house on Trigg Avenue that his grandmother had owned since 1971, and that he now owned, renovated down to the studs, and back up again over 7 years of weekends and evenings, because the house was where his grandmother had taught him to be still, and where his daughter had been born, and it was not going anywhere, and neither was he. He ran a logistics and freight coordination company called Cross Transit out of an office on Winchester that had 11 employees and contracts with 4 regional manufacturers and 1 national retailer whose name appeared on the side of the trailers you saw on every highway in the South. The company had a revenue number that would have surprised most people who saw his truck and his work jacket and his neighborhood. He did not discuss the revenue number. He discussed rates, timelines, and reliability because those were the things that mattered to the people he worked with, and the people he worked with had been working with him for long enough to know that when Solomon Cross said something would happen, it happened. He had been alone with Jade since she was 4. Her mother had left for reasons that were her reasons, and that Solomon had not contested, because contesting them would have required a kind of extended attention he did not have, and because Jade needed a father who was present rather than a father who was occupied with grievance. Jade was 9 now. She had her father's stillness and her mother's brightness, and she had recently developed a habit of asking questions that she then answered herself before he could respond, which he found both familiar and amusing. She kept a small notebook of things she intended to learn, organized by category. The current categories were birds of Tennessee, how engines work, and French. She had been learning French from a library book for 3 months and could order coffee and ask for directions and say, "I do not understand, but I am trying," which she reported to Solomon as the most useful sentence she had learned so far. She was at Miss Loretta's when Solomon arrived with Celeste, and she looked at Celeste from the doorway of Miss Loretta's kitchen with a specific assessment of a child who has been raised by a man who measures things carefully and has absorbed the habit. "You were in the accident," Jade said to Celeste. "Not an accusation, a categorization." "I was," Celeste said. "I'm sorry about the truck." Jade considered this. "Dad says the truck has good bones," she said. "He says good bones is more important than good looks." She looked at her father. "Is that the lady from the Fontaine building?" Solomon looked at Jade with the specific look of a parent redirecting, without making it a direction. Jade received this and went to get her backpack. Celeste looked at Solomon. "She knows the Fontaine building?" "It's on the way to her school," he said. "She notices buildings." He drove Jade to school in the damaged truck with the rain coming in slightly through the gap where the passenger door no longer sealed, and Jade sat in the back seat and told Celeste, unprompted, that she was learning the word for rain in French, which was pluie, and that it was a good word because it sounded like what it was. Celeste said she agreed. Jade said that not all words sounded like what they were, and that this was something she found interesting to think about. Solomon drove without contributing to this, which was the specific quiet of a man who has heard the thought before and has decided it is good enough to hear again without interrupting it. After school drop-off, he drove her to her attorney's building on Madison. In the rain, through the gap in the door. She told him the general shape of it before she got out, because she felt she owed him something, and information was the thing she had. Her father, Gerard Fontaine, had died 6 weeks ago. The estate included the Fontaine Group's property holdings and a trust structure that her father's business partner was contesting on the grounds of a side agreement that allegedly predated the formal trust documents. The partner's name was Douglas Reeve. He was claiming a 40% stake in the core property portfolio that would, if the claim succeeded, effectively transfer control of the Fontaine Group's most significant assets out of Celeste's hands and into his. Solomon listened to this without expression. When she finished, he looked at the building on Madison. "Your father knew Douglas Reeve for how long?" he said. 30 years, she said. "Since before the company was anything." Solomon nodded once. He looked at the rain on the windshield for a moment. "Reeve Properties filed for a zoning variance on the crosstown parcel in 2021, he said. The variance was denied. The denial was based on a traffic impact study. The study was conducted by a firm that Reeve owns through a holding company. He paused. A traffic impact study conducted by a firm you own through a holding company is not an independent study. The city's planning board didn't know about the ownership connection when they accepted the study. I don't know if your attorney knows any of that. Celeste looked at him. "I move freight through that district," he said. "I pay attention to the zoning board because zoning affects my roots." He said this without emphasis. The way someone states the reason they know a thing without claiming the knowledge is more than it is. It was more than it was. "How do you know Reeve holds the study firm?" she said. "Because I read the incorporation documents when the variance was filed," he said. "It matters who controls the roads near my yards." She looked at the building on Madison. She looked at the crack in her phone on her lap. She looked at the man in the work jacket in the truck with the caved passenger door that was still running in the rain. She went upstairs to her attorney. She was 40 minutes late. Douglas Reeve arrived at the mediation session on a Thursday in a car that his driver brought to the curb and that he waited in for 90 additional seconds after stopping so that the arriving could be seen properly. He was 61 and had the physical confidence of someone who had spent 3 decades being agreed with and had incorporated the agreement into his posture. He wore a watch that retailed for more than Solomon's truck had cost new, and he touched the crown of it when he sat down at the table, a small proprietary gesture, as if confirming that the expensive thing was still present. Solomon was in the room because Celeste's attorney had asked him to provide a written statement on the crosstown zoning matter, and had then asked if he would be present in case clarification was needed. He was seated to the left, not at the table. He had a folder. He was reading it when Reeve came in. Reeve looked at Solomon the way he looked at the chair he was about to sit in, as furniture, located and categorized and assigned a value in approximately 1 second. Solomon did not look up from the folder. Reeve's attorney made the opening case. The side agreement, allegedly signed by Gerard Fontaine in 2009, gave Reeve 40% of the core portfolio in exchange for capital contributed during a period of financial stress. The agreement had surfaced 3 weeks after Gerard's death. The original could not be located. A notarized copy had been submitted. Solomon looked up from the folder. The notarization stamp on the copy is from a firm that wasn't licensed in Tennessee until 2011, he said. He said it to Celeste's attorney, not to Reeve. The agreement is dated 2009. The notary firm that stamped it didn't exist in 2009. The room was quiet. "The firm's licensing records are public," Solomon said. "Page 4 of what I sent you this morning." Reeve's attorney looked at his client. Reeve's hand moved to the crown of his watch. He held it there. Solomon closed the folder. He set it on the table in front of Celeste's attorney. He looked at Reeve for the first time since Reeve had entered the room. Gerard Fontaine came to me in 2019, Solomon said. He needed freight coordination for a confidential asset transfer, physical records from the original 2009 negotiations. He told me why he was moving them. He told me what was in them. He told me that if anything ever happened to him and someone produced a document claiming a side agreement from that period, the document was false. Because he had the original negotiations recorded, and the recordings showed no side agreement was discussed. He paused. He gave me a copy of those recordings to hold. He said I was the only person he trusted who Douglas Reeve wouldn't think to look for. Celeste looked at Solomon. Solomon looked at the table. I have the recordings, he said. If your attorney tells me where to send them. Reeve's hand left the watch. He straightened the left cuff of his jacket, then the right, and then he put both hands flat on the table and looked at them, and did not look at anything else for a long time. His attorney asked for a recess. The recess lasted 3 minutes. When Reeve's attorney returned, he said that his client wished to withdraw the claim pending a review of newly surfaced documentation. He set it to the wall to the left of Celeste's attorney's head. He did not look at Solomon. Reeve did not return to the room. Celeste sat in the conference room after everyone else had left and looked at the table. Solomon was still in the chair to the left. He had the folder closed in his lap and was looking at the window. He came to you, she said. In 2019, he said. Yes, he never told me. He said you had enough to carry, Solomon said. He said you'd built the company into something that deserved protecting, and he wasn't going to let Reeve get near it while he was alive. And he wasn't going to leave you exposed to it after he was gone. He paused. He said he was sorry he couldn't tell you directly. He said you would understand why he needed someone Reeve didn't know to look at. She was quiet for a long time. The rain had stopped. The window showed the wet street below and the late afternoon light coming through the clouds in the particular way it came through after Memphis rain, low and amber and briefly luminous. He knew you, she said. From before? He used my company for freight coordination starting in 2017, Solomon said. He said he hired me because I was the only logistics provider in the region who had never sent an invoice with an error in it. He looked at the window. He said accuracy in small things was how you found people who were accurate in large ones. She thought about the truck, about the passenger doors she had destroyed, about the man who had checked her eyes in the rain and asked if she was hurt before he looked at what she'd done to his vehicle. She thought about Jade in the back seat saying pluie was a good word, because it sounded like what it was. She thought about her father, who had known something about accuracy in small things, and had spent 2 years finding somewhere safe to put the large one. The estate settled without further contest. The core portfolio remained intact. Celeste sat at her father's desk, her desk now, and looked at the city through the window and thought about a man who had kept a secret for 4 years in a freight office on Winchester Avenue. Not because he owed her father anything beyond the terms of a logistics contract, but because her father had been accurate about him. 1 year later, Jade's French had progressed to the point where she could read simple books in it, and had recently encountered the phrase raison d'être, which she had brought to Solomon, and he had told her what it meant, and she had written it in the notebook under a new category she had titled Things Worth Knowing, because they are true in 2 directions. She had not explained this category to him. He had not asked her to. The notebook sat on the kitchen table most mornings. Celeste had read 5 entries from it over 5 Sunday breakfasts and had written 1 contribution of her own, at Jade's invitation, which Jade had read and nodded at and underlined. Solomon's truck had a new passenger door. It was the same flat black as the rest of it, brushed by hand, fitted to the frame with a tolerance that required 3 adjustments to achieve. He had done it himself over a weekend. It sealed against rain perfectly. Jade had tested it on the first wet morning by holding her hand along the edge and feeling for air, and she had reported no gap to Solomon, who had said good, and she had said it was very good actually, and he had agreed that it was. Celeste's hand was near his on the table on Sunday mornings when they read. Neither of them had moved it away in 4 months. Jade had noticed this and written something in the notebook about it, and closed the notebook and put it in her bag, and not mentioned it to either of them, because some things, she had decided, were better left in the category of things still becoming true. Some men carry other people's most important things not because they were asked to be trustworthy, but because they always were, and the world eventually brings the right person to the door to find out. Share this with someone who has been carrying something for someone else and never been thanked for it. Subscribe for more stories like this every week, and tell us if your father had hidden his most important secret with a stranger to protect you, and you only found out after he was gone. Would you have felt protected, or would you have felt left out of something you deserved to know? We read every one.